September is nearly upon us, so it is time to set up our bullet journals. I mean, technically speaking, we're like a good week out until September actually starts, but considering I usually set these up about halfway through the month, it kind of feels a bit late for me. I don't know, did you actually notice that it's later than usual? Starting on our first page though, typically this would be where I'd put my projects list, but this time instead I'm going with my cover page. For the last couple of months in my journal, I've been opting in to use washi tape or printouts so that I didn't have to do a whole bunch of doodling myself. I've been in a bit of a creative slump, so the washi tape and the printables was just kind of an easier way to do my decoration for that period where I wasn't feeling as creative. Technically speaking, I do still feel like I'm in the throes of the slump, but I'm kind of trying to brute force my way out of it by doing a little bit more doodling in this monthly setup. We'll see how that goes in the long run, but I'm feeling pretty good about this setup and I'm excited to share it with you. In September, I'm going with a crime investigation theme in celebration of Crime Prevention Week. Given that, to start us off, I wanted to do a crime evidence board, like you'd typically see in those crime shows and whatnot, as my cover page for the month. This has elements like Polaroid pictures, some evidence taken from the scene, little sticky notes, and of course the typical red string to connect all the dots together. It really just involved me going to Google, looking up crime board inspiration, and taking a bunch of elements from those. One of the things I knew I wanted to have as part of my setup was a kind of ransom note inspired title design, you know, where they take the newspaper clippings and magazine cutouts and kind of piece the letters together. I didn't want to actually have to do that, like find the letters and cut them all out and stick them in, so I opted just to hand draw it. This is kind of similar to what I did with my Mean Girls theme a couple of years ago, just with considerably less pink. For the color palette that I did pick in this setup, I went with a combination of primary colors and some different shades of grey. I didn't want it to be super bright, outside of the pops of yellow that you'll see later, so I went for a slightly darker toned red and blue. For all of the black line work on my doodly elements on this evidence board, I'm just using my Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen. I actually find it quite nice to draw with this pen. I like that you get the slight variation in the line weight when you press either harder or less hard onto the page, but the real reason that I'm using it is because it is waterproof, which means when I come over the top with my Tombow dual brush markers, I don't have to worry about smudging. My typical writing pen, the Papermate Inkjoy, certainly smudges when you go over the top with any kind of marker, so I wanted to make sure to avoid that for this kind of decoration. Having a closer look at our evidence board elements, in the top left we have a Polaroid of something that must be missing, Bujo number 12, and it probably won't be much of a surprise when you see what colour I choose to colour it in with. Next to this though, we have a little newspaper clipping. Rather than write out fake text for the newspaper, I just used little blocks of darker grey to represent the sections that have writing or have pictures. The picture beside that one is a bit of forensic photography, as taken at the scene of the crime. I cannot tell you what type of crime actually went on here, like we've got a knife and we've got the missing bullet journal. I really don't know, but I'm sure there's a narrative in here somewhere. Continuing our cycle around, we have a little Polaroid picture again with some footprints, and a little sticky note that tells us that they are size 13s, and underneath this we have a map with little X'd out locations, possibly for related crimes, or maybe locations that they've checked in terms of finding that lost bullet journal. I wanted to have some physical evidence on the board too, so next to this we have a little weapon in a sealed bag, hopefully sealed well because that one looks like it could be a health hazard. In the bottom left corner we have a little profile of a person who we don't necessarily know what they look like, but we have at least listed their name, age, and a couple of other details. The number plate that we have above this could possibly be for the getaway vehicle, but let me know in the comments if you know where this number plate is from. I feel like it's very much one of those like, if you know kind of scenarios, so let me know if you know. One of the things that I was particularly worried about when it came to this evidence board though was the idea of balance. So making it look like there was enough elements on the page so that it felt full, but not so many that it felt cluttered. Outside of my initial sketch, I did feel there were a couple of areas that needed some additional doodle work, so I did end up adding those in as I was drawing this out, but I think that the finished product does a pretty good job of remaining balanced and not overwhelming. One of the reasons in particular that I didn't want to make it too full is that I didn't want to have to doodle all that stuff out. Given the whole aforementioned creativity slump, I did not want to overwhelm myself with too much doodling, so having enough elements to feel satisfied, but not so many that I was just going to get fed up with it. In terms of timing, from first touch of the pen to final erasings, this cover page took about 1 hour and 7 minutes. but as usual that doesn't include idea generation time or sketching out time, which did take me a while because I really wanted to make sure I had all of the elements in the right places and get good balance on my board so that it didn't look too overcrowded but also didn't look too sparse. The right hand page is going to be my projects list that we would have typically set up first, but before we get into that, let's have a look at how this month was going. For August, we went with a sunflowers theme. As mentioned before, I used washi tape for this one, which made the decoration super easy. I really loved the bright color palette. The combination of gold and blue is one of my favorites. One thing that I did feel was lacking for this setup was having a monthly task list. That's not usually something that I like to include, but I felt it was missing in this setup. In general though, I found that consistency in my bullet journal was something that I struggled with in August. There were some days where I really got in and filled out a page to completion, and other days where I barely touched my journal at all. This probably wasn't helped by the fact that in my daily logs in particular, we had some issues. You can see that a good chunk of them have a gold line through the middle, and that's because I thought I needed to set up 2 dailies per page rather than 2 dailies per spread. I did actually end up using a day per page, but for a lot of the days in August, I really didn't need that much space, whereas for other ones, I needed more. For that reason, for September, I think that rather than pre-sectioning out where I'm gonna have my daily logs, I might go back to the whole build as you go kind of approach. August isn't quite over yet, so I still have a bit of time to fill out the remaining pages and also put in my monthly reflection. But getting back to the September setup, now we're setting up the projects list. I'm still trying to find a layout for my projects list that really resonates with me. This is a change up to what I typically use, both in terms of positioning and structure, but I think it'll still need some more workshopping. As mentioned, typically I'd put my projects list on the very first page of the setup, so on the left-hand side of the spread, but the reason I wanted to put it over here is because I really wanted to have that evidence board for my cover page, but it was going to make more sense to have that on the left. For September, I'm going to be having little tabs run down the side of the spread, kind of to make it look like a book of case notes, and it'd be kind of odd to have an evidence board in your case notes book. To make the tabs though, I just removed the side of the right-hand page after drawing in where I wanted the tab to go. By drawing it in first, it meant that I had a pretty clear idea of where I needed to cut the page, but I also wanted to have it so that each of the pages of the setup had a nice thick black outline around the very outside of the page. This isn't something that I typically do if I'm making tabs. I just wanted to kind of add to the doodly nature of the setup, and I thought that having that black outline kind of added to that. You can see that I did cut the tabs for the other pages before we started filming the setup, kind of as a proof of concept, and also because I don't think you need to watch me cut out 4 tabs in a row. It can be a little fiddly, and honestly I just like to get my head really close to my journal when I'm doing fiddly work, which doesn't make for great viewing when you're going with an overhead shot. One of the reasons that I needed to include yellow in my color palette was because I wanted to use this bright yellow caution washi tape. I do wish it had been like a keep out or a crime scene washi tape, but I figured it fit the aesthetic I was going for well enough, and it was a tape that I already had. I think it gets the message across. For the actual structure of the page though, I went with 3 different styles of boxes, each to hold different types of projects. So we've got one that looks like it's been ripped out of a spiral notebook, one that looks like a sticky note that's peeling up at the corner, and the other one that looks like it's been stuck in with a little bit of tape. As said, each of these different boxes is going to hold a different type of project. So the longest box is for my Bujo Basic series, or the videos that I have left to release for that. The notepad paper is for my team member perks, so the different pieces of content and benefits that I release each month for the members of the team with a capital T. If you want to join the team with a capital T, then there's information in the description box. And then the last box down the bottom is to hold any other projects that I have. So this could be things like other YouTube videos that I'll be releasing, personal projects, or anything else. In terms of timing, this one took 27 minutes from first touch of the pen to final erasings, and then it's time to flip on over to my monthly log. As I mentioned before, one of the things that I thought was missing from my monthly log in August was having a monthly task list. And this isn't something that I typically include, but I was finding that I didn't have a place to put tasks that I wanted to work on in the month, but didn't necessarily know when I wanted to work on them in the month. I thought I might trial having one for September, so that is what the right-hand page of this spread is dedicated to. Usually for my monthly logs, or the calendar aspect of my monthly log, I'd put that calendar over both sides of the spread, but because there's so much more horizontal space in the square notebook, I could fit the entire calendar just onto one page, which means I have that available room to do the monthly task list here on the right. I wanted to bring in some decorative elements to this, so down in the bottom left corner we have some Polaroids that have been drawn in to look like they've been stuck in with tape, and then in the top right we have an ID card which I've drawn in to look like it's been attached with a paper clip. If you've watched any of my setups before, you'll know that I love highlighting every second line pretty much wherever I can, so that is exactly what I'm doing for this task list, and I'll also be doing it for the monthly calendar on the left-hand page. I just find that this is a great way to make it feel like the page has been utilized in full. I'm kind of allergic to white space, it makes me feel uncomfortable. So putting in a small touch like these lines just makes it look like the page is a little bit more full. In terms of the dimensions of my calendar, each of the calendar boxes are 5 dot grid boxes across by 6 dot grid boxes tall, or 2.5 centimeters by 3 centimeters. This fits really nicely into the dimensions of the square notebook, even if it is technically 1 dot grid box shy of my preferred width. As a side note, if you're enjoying this setup video and you want to make sure that you don't miss out on any future setups, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I share heaps of videos about bullet journaling and personal productivity, and I would love to have you as part of our team. In terms of the header for our calendar boxes though, I wanted to bring back the red string from our evidence board. I find that repeated elements like this in a setup really help to make things feel cohesive. Rather than doing all of the lettering in the same style, I opted in to use a combination of the post-it notes, the Polaroids, and also the little envelope that we had on our evidence board, mainly so it didn't feel so out of place on the evidence board compared to the rest of the setup, because everything else gets a repeat somewhere else. In terms of timing, from first touch of the pen to final erasings, the monthly log took about 35 minutes in total. So that includes all of the parts that we did here on film and also the cutting out of the Dutch door that was done before filming. Flipping on over though, and we are on to the actions list and the habit tracker. One of the things that I was particularly excited about when it came to the square notebook was my habit tracking page. The style I'm setting up this time is similar to one I've done before, where we have all of my daily habits down one side of the layout, and then on the other side I have space for my weekly or monthly things. But typically when I set this style up, it would feel a little bit squashed because I was doing it in an A5 notebook. With the square comes the extra horizontal space though, so these things have a lot more room to breathe, which is kind of nice. The daily habits is set up as a vertical log, so we just have the numbers for each of the days of the month down the left hand side, followed by their initial, and then each column that follows that is for a different habit. On the other half of that page though, the top section is going to be for a key, so a place to outline what each of my habits are. I'm going to be writing those habits in using icons. Underneath this is a little space for some decoration, and then underneath that is a place for my weekly tasks. To record my weekly tasks, I'll just have a column for each of the different weeks, 1 through 5, and then each row in that section represents a different weekly habit that I'm trying to keep. Most of these habits will probably be related to my weekly reset, but some of them will be related to other areas of my life too. In terms of the decoration on that habit tracker, I felt that I couldn't have a crime investigation theme without having fingerprints somewhere. Rather than trying to draw fingerprints, I figured I'd just get my hands dirty and put my own fingerprint on the page. This was done very simply by just colouring in my finger with a Tombow and then pressing it onto the page, but I did make sure to line the page with washi tape first so that I didn't get ink literally everywhere. I'm a bit of a persnickety biscuit, I don't like it when my pages feel messy, so I wanted to keep those fingerprints contained in their boxes. I went with red for my fingerprints, so these might have been fingerprints that were found at the scene of the crime rather than ones that were taken down at the station. And rather than getting every single one of my fingers dirty, I decided just to use the one repeatedly, which at the time of doing this voiceover is still kind of red. For my actions list though, rather than making this structured, I'm keeping it very simple by just putting some decoration down in the bottom right corner and then highlighting every second line in the grey. I will say that the post-it note that I used to decorate this corner didn't really turn out quite the way I wanted to. The dimensions on it are a little bit off, but I'm not bothered enough by it to bother fixing it at this stage. When I start using my actions list, then maybe it'll bother me more. These two pages together took about 28 minutes to set up, and then it was time to flip on over to an atypical layout for me, and this is a project planning page, in particular for one project that I'm working on, which is making a course. You may have seen me mention it on the community tab, but I'm planning a goal setting course to help people with all of the stages from brainstorming and picking their goals to writing them properly in ways that they're actually going to be able to be achieved, planning for action, and then actually taking action. I'm really enjoying the progress that I'm making on it so far, but I want to make even more progress in September, so I thought that having a spread dedicated to the actual planning and doing of this project would be a good idea. Because it's just a header that we have on this page, it only took about 5 minutes to set up, including the tab making and drawing out the title. But flipping on over, the next spread that we have is going to be dedicated to reflection, both a monthly reflection and an end of quarter reflection. Because September is going to be the end of quarter 3, and then we'll move into quarter 4 for October, that's going to be a period where I intentionally reflect on my goals and set new goals for the period ahead. My typical monthly review would go across a full spread, but there's a lot of extra space in the square notebook, and I don't think I really need quite that much space for it, so I decided to condense it to just the one page. I've managed to fit all of those sections over on the left-hand side of the spread, which is why I thought I could put my quarterly review on the right. To add some visual interest to an otherwise fairly basic layout, I decided to change up the style of each of the boxes on the reflection page, effectively just cycling through the styles that we've used previously. So the notes with the tape, the sticky notes with the peeling corners, and the ones that look like they're ripped out of a spiral notepad. My monthly reflection does technically have 10 sections, so it isn't one section per box. The box in the lower left-hand corner I'm using for both my looking forward to section and my nervous about section, mainly because both of those deal with a similar thing. We're looking into the future and considering what's exciting and what's making me not so excited. It'll be interesting at the end of September to see which of these sections are more full compared to others, because then I can tweak the layout for the next month so that I'm utilizing the space as well as I can be. Before we head into the final flip through, if you liked this setup, make sure to give the video a thumbs up. I personally am really chuffed with how it turned out. It was fun to get back to something that was a bit more doodly rather than washi tape heavy, but then also utilize a washi tape that I have had in my collection for ages. I'm looking forward to getting in and populating my actions list and my habit tracker before the month actually starts, so that I can hit the ground running in September. The course page being blank at the moment both fills me with excitement because there's a lot of possibility with a blank page, but also just a little bit of nervousness because I know that this is one of the bigger projects that I've undertaken, but I know that people are going to get a lot of value out of it, so I'm more excited than I am nervous. If you are still on the hunt for September bullet journal inspiration, then I do have a full playlist of my previous September setups. Or if you were looking for monthly setups in general, then the one at the bottom is where it's at. Click or tap on either of those and I'll see you over there.